Today, we're doing something a bit different. We're analyzing high stakes political strategy, specifically how campaigns use rhetoric when the clock is really ticking. And we're not looking at polished speeches or op eds. We've got our hands on some source material. These are excerpts pulled from the internal messaging platform for the Campaigning for Proposition 50 effort. So this is the raw stuff, right? The kind of high-pressure communication aimed at firing up their core team in those critical final weeks.
Exactly. And what this source material gives you is this really unfiltered look inside the campaign's kind of pressure cooker moment. What's crucial here is who they're talking to. These messages are for the volunteers and organizers. So this isn't about swaying some undecided voter out there. No, this is about fueling the engine room. It's for the people already committed, the ones doing the hard work. They're hitting them with emotion, with urgency.
Okay, right. So let's unpack that. Where do they start? It looks like they lead with a big foundational statement, almost philosophical. Yeah, here it is, the core principle they put right up front. Voters should pick their representatives, not the other way around.
That is just, well, rhetorically, it's a perfect anchor, isn't it? It immediately positions Prop 50 not just as like another piece of legislation, but as a corrective measure. See, by saying the other way around is what's happening now, that the system lets reps choose their voters, maybe through gerrymandering or other means. They tap into this really deep sense of systemic unfairness. So the proposition becomes absolutely necessary. It's presented as the way to restore, basic democratic fairness, real voter agency.
Right. It frames it as fixing something broken, connecting this specific measure to the health of democracy itself. That makes sense as a starting point. But, okay, having a strong principle is one thing. Rhetoric needs to drive action, especially with time running out. How does this internal message build that urgency? They seem to pivot pretty fast to the timeline. Here it says, we have just over 2 weeks to pass Prop 50.
And laying down that hard deadline, that just over 2 weeks, that's a classic critical strategic move. For those volunteers, the ones already invested, scarcity dramatically bumps up the value of what they do right now. It basically screams, okay, planning's over, this is it, the final sprint, all or nothing. So that tight deadline isn't a negative, it's turned into a powerful motivator.
Okay, but you often hear campaigns thanking their hard workers. Is this just, standard flattery? How does this message avoid making them feel burnt out, especially with such a short, intense time frame? Does it actually make them push harder?
That's a great point. And I think it's more than just flattery here. Look at how they frame it. It's about specific validation. They're not just saying thanks for your hard work. They're making the success of the entire proposition conditional on their continued effort. The message implicitly and maybe explicitly elsewhere says, we only win if you keep doing this hard work. So it turns passing Prop 50 from just an idea into like the direct reward for their personal commitment. It demands that final, intense push before exhaustion really takes hold.
I see. So it's not just praise, it's linking their specific actions directly to the outcome. That's clever. But then they really ramp things up. They don't just keep this about California, do they? The campaign blows up the scope, claiming this vote has, and I'm quoting, critical implications not just for California, but for our entire country. That's a big claim for a state prop.
It is a huge claim. And that's the ultimate technique for elevating importance, right? Why would they assign national weight to a state-level proposition? Well, think about how political reform often happens. It frequently bubbles up from the states. California, in particular, is often seen as a bellwether or a testing ground. So if Prop 50 passes there, it becomes this powerful working model, a proof of concept. It could genuinely inspire and provide a roadmap for similar reform movements all across the U.S.
So they're basically telling their volunteers, look, what you're doing here in California could actually change the whole country.
Oh,
Wow. That's quite the motivator. It makes every phone call, every door knock seem monumentally important.
precisely. It connects their local effort, their personal sacrifice even, to a potentially national consequential outcome. And strategically, this does two things. First, as you said, it deepens the emotional buy-in for the base, makes their work feel way more significant than just one ballot measure. Second, it helps attract national attention, maybe even funding or support from outside the state. It positions California as the vanguard, the front line in a bigger fight for fairness.
Okay. That makes perfect sense. And that kind of leads directly into the final vision they paint, doesn't it? The emotional payoff if they pull this off. The campaign promises that passing Prop 50 will, quote, send a message of hope across the country that change is possible if we do the work.
Yes, and that phrase, it just wraps up the whole strategy so neatly. Hope is obviously the key emotional currency here, the big payoff. But look closely at the condition attached if we do the work.
Mm.
That last bit circle backs and validates every single hour those organizers have already poured in. It clearly states success isn't random, it's not inevitable, it's earned through their specific grassroots effort.
It's like the final part of the emotional contract with their team. Your work creates this hope.
Hmm.
And they seem to be thinking beyond just getting the votes, too. The message mentions a goal to foster meaningful discussion and user engagement around the proposition passing.
Right. They're already planning for what happens after Election Day. They want the win, assuming they get it, to be more than just a win. They want it to be a catalyst, to turn that victory into sustained momentum, into ongoing conversation. Essentially, use the success of Prop 50 to kickstart that broader national discussion about political reform they hinted at earlier.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap what we've unpacked in this deep dive. We looked at the playbook for Prop 50's final push, pulled from their internal messages. Strategy seems to be anchor it all in a strong, almost moral principle, voters choosing their reps. Then, drive urgency with a clear, short deadline targeting the core team. And finally, elevate the stakes massively, framing this state vote as having national importance and offering hope as the reward for the team's hard work.
Yeah, it's really a masterful blueprint for mobilizing a base that's already committed. It uses principle, validation, urgency, all balanced together for those critical final days. They took what could be seen as just a local California issue and skillfully gave it national resonance.
Yeah.
And they used that core promise of agency, the idea that ordinary people, through hard work, can force real change to fuel that last big push.
And that idea of agency, of change starting at the local or state level, that brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. This campaign explicitly ties the success of a single state measure, Prop 50, to the possibility of broader national change. It relies on the state win to maybe set a precedent.
Right. So the question to chew on is this. If major structural political reforms, the kind Prop 50 represents, increasingly need to be proven out state by state first to build momentum or serve as a model, well, what does that tell us about the perceived effectiveness, or maybe the lack thereof, of our federal system of Congress in tackling these kinds of wide-ranging reforms directly across the country right now?
Something to definitely think about. We'll leave you with that thought until our next deep dive.